Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Small Talk. Well, my guest today, I just have to read this, okay? He is a composer, a media artist, visual artist, animator, educator, interaction designer, and audio producer whose creative practice explores the use of technology to enable the exploration of the infinite design space of cultural practices. Whew, that's a mouthful. Now, there's a lot more to him than that, though, let me tell you. Time to meet him, Kenneth Newby. Welcome to the show, Kenneth.
Thank you, Nancy. Nice to be here.
Oh, it's nice to have you here for sure. I just, going through the bio that you sent out. Thank you for doing that, by the way. It's so much fun. I love reading where people have been and where they're going. So now you were talking about your music at the beginning, and it blends a rich set of influences and experiences. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. Well, the musical path, some thumbnail sketch. I've been doing music since I can remember. My parents were the kind of parents who gave their children music lessons extremely early. I must have been 5 or 6 when I started. So I was studying classical music, singing and piano. And I got tired of that in my teens under the influence of the more interesting forms of popular music that were coming along, particularly the Beatles, late Beatles records my older sister was bringing home, got me inspired on a number of levels, but mainly they were doing so much interesting experimentation in the studio with those late albums that they did from 1966 on. And I could hear that there was something extraordinary going on. It wasn't just people playing their instruments, but there was some technological mediation that was going on. These days we talk about the recording studio being used as a musical instrument. And I had intuitions of that. Around the same time, my parents bought me one of the very early Philips cassette recorders. Philips had invented that medium of the little plastic cassette tape. And I enjoyed recording sounds and playing with that recorder. I learned that if I used a toothpick, I could make it play backwards and forwards at different speeds and start to do some very rudimentary kind of electronic music, which I wasn't even thinking of it as electronic music. I didn't even know that term yet. But that led me later on to have an interest in electroacoustic music. But before I got there, I moved to Vancouver after leaving high school in Abbotsford, where I grew up, and got involved with the improvisation scene in Vancouver. In particular, this group of musicians that worked under the umbrella of the New Orchestra Workshop, NOW. That's still a very active organization in the city to this day. And started playing, met a lot of friends that I still have to this day. Ended up at university studying electronic music. Well, no, let's back up one piece. In around 1979, I went to New York State, to Woodstock, New York. There's an extraordinary school there called the Creative Music Studio. And I went there to work with a guy named George Lewis, who I knew as an improvising trombonist. And when I got there, I met George, and I discovered that he was actually still interested in improvisation, of course, but he had been building his own synthesizer and learning to program a little computer and writing software that could listen to what he played and make some kind of response to what he played, playing the synthesizer that he had built. So it was an early form of interactive music. And I had the year before completed a year-long training at Vancouver Vocational Institute to become a certified electronics technician, following the parental advice that you always need to have a skill to fall back on. That was always the term they would use. You need something to fall back on. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to fall, I'll fall somewhere in there. It seems like a practical skill. Now, during that year-long training, we had spent a month learning how to program a little computer, very simple, very rudimentary machine, learned how to turn little LED lights on and off. So when I met George the following year in Woodstock, he started explaining what he was doing to me. And because of this training I'd had, I understood what he was talking about. It wasn't just like, oh my God, that's just like crazy, complicated. I can't understand that. It was like, I get it. I understand what you're doing. And that's really fascinating. And so he got excited because there was someone there, a young person, well, he wasn't that much younger than him, but someone who could understand what he was up to. So we spent a lot of time over those 6 weeks discussing what he was doing, how he was doing it. And that really set my compass to start thinking about music being mediated by computation, by code, by this remarkable new technology that was just emerging in those days. So I came back to Vancouver and I ordered a little computer online, this little single board thing that you programmed in machine language. It was awfully difficult to learn how to do it, but I finally got it to work. And that really launched my interest in using computers and technology for music. Around the same time at SFU, I was taking a course in acoustic communication with Barry Truax, who was one of the founding members of the World Soundscape Project with Murray Schaefer there. And in one of his lectures, he was talking about the sound environment, the soundscape, and how it's always present. And he played a piece of music from the court of the Paku Alaman in Yogyakarta in central Java. A beautiful piece of traditional gamelan music, gamelan being these large orchestras made of largely bronze instruments. Maybe 30 people play in one of the large orchestras. It's a big orchestra. And it was in this, it's called a pendopo. It's an open walled pavilion with marble floors. The music resonates beautifully in this space, and you can indeed hear the birds that are roosting up in the ceiling and a bit of the traffic outside. But I was struck by the beauty of that music and got this idea planted in me that someday I'd like to visit that place and find out who are the people that make such extraordinarily beautiful music. And I started listening more and more to that music from Indonesia, Java, and Bali mostly. And eventually did end up visiting in 1984 and discovered that such an open and generous culture of artists that it was possible to return and study with the master musicians there, which I did. So I spent the next couple of years, 3 or 4 years really. I spent 2 years in total living in Indonesia, learned to speak the language, and studied the music and the culture, shadow puppetry to some degree. And that had a huge influence on my music. You can hear it in the early compositions. I include those instruments and those ways of playing in that music. And eventually I internalized it. So it's still there. It's a huge influence on the way I think about music, both socially and formally as the way you construct music. And, then I went on, having a family, decided to work. Well, first I worked in the game industry for a while at Electronic Arts, working on new ways of creating interaction in the games around the sound, the way the music evolves, the way the speech evolves, and the way the soundscapes are organized in those interactive experiences. And then I eventually found my way at the university doing research and in interactive media, because that's the interesting thing about the way computers work. As we know, they used to call it this notion of convergence, where all of the art forms would converge in the digital form of the computer. And to some degree, that's true, because I was able to translate the work that I'd done with music into other media, such as video and speech and interaction in museums and things like that. So that was largely what I was doing at the university, was researching the way those techniques that I had developed in my music could be applied to other areas. That's yeah. There's more of it. That's a good.
By the way, I've been to Indonesia, but well, not just, but I didn't get to Bali. I was in Jakarta because my son was working there for a year. So it was like, from the people. There's something about the people that, because my son lives in China, and I love China. I've been there 5 times, but the people are so different.
Yeah.
And so
always have a smile for you, don't they?
Yeah. I just absolutely love it. Now you in
1994,
you released, what was it called? Ecology of Souls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That piece came out of the graduate work I was doing for my Master of Fine Arts. I'd been working with my partner at the time, Lorraine Thompson, on a multimedia work where we were studying, the background research for the project was various practices that shamans engage in various cultures around the world. So a certain focus on altered states of consciousness and how those are used for healing and self-realization. And we made a piece that included music and video and dance. So the video was projected on a large screen and Lorraine was the dancer. And we had a small group of musicians. There was a prepared piano, and I was doing some of the live electronic music for that piece. So I took the music that we had made for that project and extended it, refined it, and a local record company executive named Tony Reef, he runs a record label called Songlines in Vancouver, heard the music and wanted to release it as a CD. So that was the first commercial release of my music. And it interestingly made a kind of a splash. It got linked up with this music called, a style called space music, which is the kind of meditative, some people even call it new age music, because it has a large sense of space about it. There's lots of drones. I never thought of it as that. I thought of it more as a style of music called spectral music, because it explores the harmonic series and textures and timbres. But it made a splash in that scene, and so I ended up, doing more music like that for a few years. But I never seemed to be able to stick with a particular style, so I moved away from that. Right. And so it was kind of a 15 minutes of fame situation. And then I got interested in making other kinds of music, so it was no longer relevant to that particular bubble anymore. Right. But that was the beginning, yes.
It sounds to me like you have a lot of just natural intuitiveness when it comes to music or styles or whatever. I don't know.
Well, yeah, like I said, I've been doing it since I knew myself. So music comes very naturally to me. Yeah. And I have a Catholic interest in different kinds of music. People often will ask you, like, what's your favorite kind of music? And I can't answer that question. Yeah. I have favorite musicians, and they play in a variety of styles. So basically it comes down to, I'll listen to anything if it's played by good musicians, because you can hear that skill, coming through.
Yeah, I can say I have a favorite. I mean, I love all types of music.
Yeah.
But my absolute favorite is anything that makes me feel like I want to dance.
The stuff that makes you want to move. Yeah. I think that's a really common, characteristic in people. Music, it gets in our bodies, and yeah.
Well, recently I went to a healing ceremony with an Indigenous band here in Chilliwack, and the drums. Oh my goodness, the drums, that's something that really gets you. And then later on, somebody explained to me that they consider that the mother's heartbeat. So that's what's inside, So
indeed.
Yeah. So
were they playing the powwow drums?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were, and then they had the singers at the same time, and they had a group who had gone through the in residential school in the 60s group in the center, and the dancers were around them. It's just the most beautiful thing I'd ever been part of or got to witness. It was just wonderful.
I have a story about one of those drums.
Yes.
When I was at the Fine Arts Department at the University of the Fraser Valley, Abbotsford campus, I had a student in my new media classes for a few years running. Her name was Debbie Bobb. She's an Indigenous woman from the Thompson Rivers Band, but she lives in Chilliwack. And she would come out to Abbotsford for the classes with me. And she was really a dedicated student. And I always liked working with people like that very much. And so I was helping her a lot she was learning to make video documentaries of the events that would happen in her local band in Chilliwack. And eventually she had to stop her studies for some reason I don't recall, but I hadn't seen her for a while. And she showed up with her husband one day in the hallways on the campus in Abbotsford. And she wanted to thank me for the interactions that we had had. Nice. And, she expressed her appreciation for the learning that we had done together. And I returned the feeling because it had been a really honor to work with her on such some meaningful projects. And she had a bag with her and she said, I want to give you a gift in recognition of the learning we did together. And she gave me one of those drums, a powwow drum, beautiful thing made by a drum maker named Grey Wolf. And, I was really, deeply touched and honored. And I sang to her and we continued to chat for a while. And then just before she left, she said, I look forward to hearing you sing with the drum one day. And I just felt like, oh my goodness, that's a deep responsibility you've just given me there. I didn't say that, but I felt, as they walked away, I thought, oh my God, how am I going to live up to that? And, it kind of preyed on me for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember the year, but it was the year that the Truth and Reconciliation Committee came out west in the fall of that year. And we were tasked at the university to recognize that one day, to spend a couple of hours with our students talking about Truth and Reconciliation, the residential school 60 Scoop. And I had been working with my Indigenous students on those issues for a while, but I felt that we weren't doing enough, like just to spend one day, a few hours. So I said, I'm going to spend the whole semester working on those issues with my media class this semester. And I called up Debbie, or I emailed Debbie, Bob, and I said, Debbie, if you remember, you told me that you were looking forward to hearing me sing with that drum. Well, I think I have a song that we can do, but I think we need to do it together, because Debbie was a victim of the 60s scoop. She had been taken from her mother in Merritt when she was just a baby, and had spent 20 years in 18 years going from foster child, foster family to foster family. And it was very abusive what she'd gone through. She was used. And she always said she wanted to tell that story, but she didn't know how. So I thought, okay, look, I think I can help you tell your story. And we'll use that drum in the piece. And so what we did is, with my class, we did a lot of interviews with local people in the community, and we asked them, I got the students to ask people what they knew about residential schools, the 60s scoop. And we accumulated a big database of people's statements. Some of them knew quite a bit. Some of them didn't know anything at all. Some of them had huge misconceptions. It was exactly what we wanted, an image of the community, and this community, and where we stood currently in terms of the issues of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And we also identified two other women who were either children of residential school survivors or residential school survivors themselves. So we had the voices of the three women, Debbie being the primary one, telling their stories. And we designed a system where we could weave their stories in and out of each other according to the themes, because it was we learned so much by doing this project. The three women who expressed their stories, the same themes came up again and again, intergenerational trauma, the statements that keep coming up again and again, that people, they don't know any better. They say, well, it didn't happen to you. Why don't you get over it? And they don't realize that, generations and generations of this community has been traumatized, and it gets passed on. So it was a really wonderful project. So the gallery was filled with autumn leaves. There was a circle cleared away in the middle with a pathway that you could get to it from the door. We borrowed some benches from the longhouse of the Semoth people in Sumas, so people could sit around the drum, which Debbie had given me, which was set up and had video projections on it and a loudspeaker behind it, where we heard the stories. So the drum was the teller of the tales, and visualize some of the traditions and so on. So yeah, I love those drums.
That's been magical.
It was a good project to do. It felt very meaningful. Yeah.
There's something about music, isn't there? There's something about music and all instruments, but music itself, right?
Yeah.
That you can interlace with people, or whatever the words are.
Yeah. Well, even at the most intimate level, biological level, it's been discovered in recent years that we always knew that there was a part of our brain that was dedicated for language, to learn language.
Right.
So that's why all humans learn language, unless they come out of the womb damaged in some way.
Right.
And it was always the miracle. We acquire language. How do we do that? Well, we're wired to learn language.
Wow.
Well, it turns out that we also have a part of our brain that's wired for music as well. So it's not something we make, it's cultural, yes, but at a deeper level, it's something we have to do. It's something we need to do. We're made for music. And some of us, I guess, make a connection with that and become more skilled at it.
Yes.
But that's why there's so much reception and response to the music that musicians make. We're made for it. Yeah, we are music in some sense, in the same way that we are language.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm.
Every time I speak to a musician, no matter what kind of instrument they play or how they perform, they're always so that there's one commonality, but at the same time, everybody comes at it with it almost from a different direction, which is one of the things that I enjoy too,
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah. So now I want to talk a little bit more, getting back to your work, your specific work, some of your music compositions. You must be able to find those things online, right?
Yeah, there's a Bandcamp. For anyone who's interested, go to my Facebook page, and there's a Bandcamp link there that has a collection of the music that I've made that I feel worthy of sharing. Yeah,
right. So
and you don't even have to buy it. You can listen to them all. I've opened it up so you can listen to them all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you working on something currently?
Yes, I am. About 6 years ago, I took an early retirement from the university, and I got back to making music because the paradoxical thing about my time at the university is I hardly ever got to do music, and it was starting to prey on me on a really deep level that I was detached from music. I had thought, okay, well, maybe music disappears and you do something else. Well, it turns out that's not the case, at least not for me. It seems it was a calling that I needed to get back to, and my body, spirit was telling me, you need to do this again. And I had done a lot of introspection leading up to that point, and I realized that the classical music experience that I'd had since a child was really the core, the ground of my musicality. And all the other things that I had done after that really were branches off of that taproot. So I wanted to set myself a project that would last for the rest of my life. I was 60 years old. I thought, okay, I've only got, 1 or 2 decades left probably, and I'd like to go as deep as I can in music with the time I have left. So I returned to some of the concerns from that European art music forum. And I did a lot of work, and I released a trilogy called the Emergence Trilogy, which you can find on that Bandcamp account. And it's really aligned with the European classical music tradition, but the contemporary version of that, 20th century, 21st century music. It's really about tuning, orchestration, timbre, color. And so the work I'm doing currently is pushing that even further. So really, fundamentally working with the harmonic series, the harmonic series being, well, some call it the scale of nature. When a string vibrates or a column of air or our vocal cords vibrate, they vibrate at many different frequencies, but those frequencies, those vibrations, all conform to a pattern. And that pattern is something that we are also biologically tuned to listen to. It's called the harmonic series, and it's very beautiful. And some argue that it's the source of our musical tuning systems around the world. That's a controversial point. Some disagree. I think there's some truth to that. But it's a very beautiful resource for tuning scales that you would use, but also for timbres. The differences between a trumpet and a guitar, is the difference in that harmonic series, the balance of the harmonics that are in that sound. And so it's a resource. It sits between tuning and timbre, between a pitch and a sound, and it's a really fascinating place to work with. So that the music that I'm working on is exploring that domain, that area.
Very nice. Sorry, I'm getting a little tickle in my throat.
Oh, I know how you feel.
I had the flu, and then this is the last thing that's kind of sticking to me. So I'm going to end it there because I know this is just going to get worse.
I understand that when I get ill, that's always what happens is I get a respiratory thing that just lingers forever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyway, just stay on camera. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience.
All right.
Sorry, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. You've been listening to Kenneth Newby, and I'm going to share his information like this, the email address for the band camp, or sorry, the website for the band camp. And he is on Facebook, as he said. I hope you continue watching my show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Kenneth. I sure did. There's so much to learn. And anyway, everybody take care, be nice, and find peace out.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see.